Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm in the Livermore Valley at Cuda Ridge Wines with winemaker and proprietor Larry Dino. Larry, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about Cuda Ridge Wines.
Well, thank you, Allison, and thank you for coming out and visiting Livermore Valley and our winery, Cuda Ridge Wines. So my wife and I started the winery back in 2007. I always call it a hobby gone wild. So we were into wine, and we'd go to Napa doing wine tasting a lot and bringing friends and doing the whole wine lifestyle type thing. And then we started doing home winemaking in our garage in 1999.
Were you living here in the Livermore Valley?
At that time, we were in Fremont, so we were making wine in our garage next to our car. And then we moved to Livermore, and then continued to do home winemaking here. Learned a lot about the business when we moved here. The wine started getting better and better. And then in 2007, we decided to start up the winery. So we rented a small space in Livermore, and we got it bonded and started as a small production boutique winery.
And 15 years later, you have a tasting room and a winery and everything.
We're still small, but much bigger than we were back then. Yes.
So where does the name Cuda Ridge come from?
Oh, that's a good question. So I mentioned my car earlier. So, well, there's a story. You want the long story or the short story?
The best story.
The best story. Okay, so I'll give you the medium story. Okay. So we were living in Fremont, and we were looking to move out of Fremont, move to wine country. We actually were looking at some property up in Windsor, which is up next to Sonoma. And we actually put an offer on some property there. And we drive all the way up there, and the real estate agent wasn't very nice, and they weren't willing to negotiate our price, and we just weren't happy with the whole experience, so we decided not to proceed with that. So we were driving home, and I saw this car on the side of the road, and it was a 1970 Barracuda, and it had a for sale sign on it, and was parked in front of this bar. And so I told my wife, Margie, I said, well, if we can't get that property, I'd like to get this car. She was not thrilled with that idea, but we talked her to go into the bar. We found the owner, ended up buying the bar. Or the car.
I was going to say, you bought a bar.
Bought a bar too, no, just the car. So then when we were doing our home winemaking in our garage, we were rebuilding the car. It was a multi-year process. And so then the barrels of wine were always next to the car. So then one day we were having a party at our house, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to name this first vintage of wine. And our last name is Dino, and Margie goes, let's call this Dino's Vino. And I said, it's got a good rhyme, but it doesn't sound like very good wine. And she goes, well, it's not. It tastes like the car. And I got to admit, the first couple home winemaking vintages weren't the best.
Well, that's the terroir, right? It was just picking up what it was made around.
There you go. Yeah, gasoline. And so then my buddy was there, and he's a car enthusiast. And he said, Larry, why don't we call this Cuda Ridge Wines? And I said, oh, that's great. So when we did our home winemaking, every time we bottled the wine, we had a picture of the car, and we just put the picture of the car on the label. So then when we started the winery back in 2007, we decided to carry that name forward. It has a story. So that's where we are.
But no more car on the label.
Well, there is.
There is?
Yeah, if you look closely. So, well, the label is Plum Crazy Purple, which is the color of the car. And the subliminal ridge is really a subliminal drawing of the car. So it's all subliminal messaging. I like more about wine than the car.
And I do like how he came up with the name Cuda Ridge, and I get the Barracuda, but the ridge was probably just a fanciful, made you sound official.
Sound like a winery, yes.
Right. So we were saying that today you are in a proper winery, not in a warehouse downtown or something. And do you own vineyards?
So we have a couple of vineyards. We do have a small vineyard at our house. We lease this space here. We're responsible for this vineyard here. We source from a lot of vineyards across Livermore. We do 100% Livermore Valley. Okay. So some of the vineyards that we source from are small family-owned vineyards. So like some of our smaller varietals that we do, like Caménère, which we can talk about later, comes from these small vineyard blocks that are owned by individuals. I have my own vineyard manager, and so me and the vineyard manager manage those blocks exactly how we want them. They might as well be our vineyards, right? And then we buy some of our larger blocks from various other growers throughout the valley.
And what you mentioned, Caménère, what other grape varieties do you work with?
Yeah, so we focus on doing Bordeaux wines, so Bordeaux-style wines. We'll talk about that later. But we do basically all the Bordeaux varietals. So we do, we only do Sauvignon Blanc. We used to do Semillon, but we don't do that anymore. And then we do I call them the 6 reds of Bordeaux. So Merlot and Cab Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and then Caménère, which is our new one in the lineup.
You've gone way back into the Bordeaux to pull up grapes they don't even make anymore.
Exactly. We do various blends as well, and we'll do some one-off varietals of non-Bordeaux, just a couple of those, but the focus is really on the Bordeaux wines.
And what's your total case production?
We do about 2,400 cases a year, so plus or minus a couple hundred, depending on the...
And then are you exclusively direct-to-consumer, like online and here in the tasting room, or do you have distribution, anywhere across the country?
Right. So yeah, we are primarily direct-to-consumer. So from the tasting room, we have a pretty sizable wine club. We do have online, so we can ship to most of the states through online. And then we're at a lot of local restaurants and wine bars and wine stores and such. But it's all direct from winery to the retail. So we don't have any brokers or distributors.
Got it. So you grew up kind of around the Livermore Valley in neighborhoods, 20, 30 minutes away, and obviously got into wine as an adult. But I'm curious what your first memory is relevant to wine.
Yeah, so I have a couple. My first one is really just kind of growing up, and as I was a child, my dad drank a lot of wine, and what I remember is he always drank, these were non-varietal wines, but his favorite was Christian Brothers. Now, I don't know that they make wine anymore. I know they do brandy, but back then they did a Christian Brothers wine, and it was this goldish orange color wine, and he let me taste it, and it was like really sweet. And then, of course, he drank Lancers, when he got fancy and that type of stuff. So then after that, I would say where we really got into it was when my wife and I were dating back in oh my God, long time ago. Don't make sure she doesn't hear that part. The early 80s, and we'd always get together with friends and we'd watch Miami Vice. Kind of dating myself here.
With wine.
Have you heard of Miami Vice?
Of course, I'm old enough to know.
Okay. So we'd watch. It was a weekly thing. We'd sit down and watch. Yeah, and then the wines we started with was. Green Hungarian, which is a sweet white wine from Wybell Winery. And then it was called Green Hungarian. I could not tell you what the varietal is. And then when we got fancy and we were stepping up in life, we started with a Navarro. It was a Navarro Gewürztraminer, which was also a sweeter style wine, but definitely upscale from our Green Hungarian.
Well, I know, it's very common to, when you start out with wine, to have more of an appeal towards a residual sugar. The sweetness is more appealing than sometimes the big tannic bombs or anything like that. Right. But obviously you have graduated. You've graduated into making Bordeaux varieties, which is quite a departure from Green Hungarian sweet wines.
I hope so.
But I'm curious, what was one of those aha moments for you in wine? What was a wine that you had that just sort of made you kind of shake your head and go, wow? And what was the occasion? Yeah,
so that would have been in probably the 1990s. And we had some friends in Fremont, and they owned a cabin up in Bear Valley. And the only way you could get to this cabin during winter is on a sled, like a snow sled. So it was buried kind of in the snow. And so we were at their house one day, and he wasn't really into wine, but he was a lawyer, and he had all these wines lined up in his cabinet. And we were snowed in, and of course we were drinking. And he goes, "Larry, why don't you go pick a wine up there?" And I start looking in his cabinet, and he's got all these phenomenal wines, but he didn't have one clue on what these wines. They could have been Gallo. I mean, he had no clue.
They could have been Green Hungarian.
Could have been Green Hungarian. I would not have picked that one at this time. So he had it was an Opus 1, so it was like it was about, I don't remember the exact vintage. It was like in the mid 1980s, so it was like it was a 10 to 12-year-old Opus 1. And the mice were actually eaten into the cork because when the cabin was like locked up, I guess the mice were trying to get good wine, I guess is what it was.
They knew what was there.
So I
Your
told
friend
them,
didn't,
I
but
said,
your did.
Yeah, so I said, hey, we better open this bottle since the mice are already starting to get into the cork. And this is should be a pretty decent bottle of wine. So we went ahead and opened it, and yeah, that was our aha moment. I mean, that wine was just so phenomenal, and it was bold, but it was softened with age and had complexity, and it was just at the time, the best wine we had ever had. So
I guess that's the wine that set you on your Bordeaux path.
Yeah. Not really. That came later.
So now if we were to come to your home, what would we find in your home? In your cellar, in your wine fridges, under your bed, wherever you keep wine? What kind of wines do you keep in there? Are they the wines you make? Are they wines of your neighbors? Are they wines from another country? Is it mostly Bordeaux varieties?
Yes, and no. So yeah, I mean, we have a pretty sizable wine cabinet, but I mean, I would say the majority of the wines that we have in there are local wines. It's mostly because we live they're very accessible, and we're always trying everyone's wine here locally and such. But we've been to many wine regions, so I would say some of the finer wines that we have are mostly from Bordeaux, Burgundy, and Napa. We have quite a few Napa. So probably Napa would be the largest, and then Bordeaux, and then Burgundy. We also have wines from other appellations through California. So I would say Paso Robles, we have quite a few, and then like Plymouth, Fiddleton area, kind of areas that we visit, and we tend to purchase wine and accumulate wine from those regions.
Is there anything you opened up recently that drank really well?
Other than Cuda Ridge.
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's what you opened most recently. But no, I mean, sometimes we open up wines from our cellar that maybe we've been holding on to, or maybe just because that's where they're stored.
Right.
Was there anything recently you opened up that just gave you joy?
Yeah, I mean, we're always drinking wine, and we're always having friends over and doing blind tastings and wine tastings and stuff. So there's lots of opportunities and stuff. The one that would come to mind is it was a white. I mean, we typically drink red, but it was a Marsal from Burgundy, and it was a Chardonnay. So it was a neutral oak Chardonnay, but it was just phenomenal. I'm not a huge Chardonnay drinker, but that style with all the earthiness and the rocky granite, minerality is just right up my alley.
Do you remember what vintage it was?
It was when we were in Burgundy last year, so then it would have been, I would say, a couple of years before that, so it wasn't real old. It was a Premier Cru, or Grand Cru, but it was, let's see, we're in 2020. I'd say around 2020, 2021.
Nice. So you have a focus on what you make.
Yes.
As you said, Bordeaux varieties. And I'm curious if you think among the Bordeaux varieties, or maybe beyond, there's a such thing as a perfect variety.
I would say no. I mean, there's of course certain varietals that we drink more of and gravitate more towards than others. But in my mind, I mean, I have a very open mind on wine and the different varietals. And I think pretty much, I mean, any varietal that's grown in the right place, made by the right winemaker, can be phenomenal. So to me, it's about the sense of place and where that varietal is grown, and then the winemaker doing a good job with that wine. Of course, there are certain styles that I prefer than other styles.
Sure. But that's personal preference.
Exactly. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the wine. It's just not my style. But no, I mean, I can't think of a varietal that I have had that I would say I'd never drink that varietal again. I mean, I might if it's from certain areas or certain winemakers. However, that wine, that varietal made in the right place with the right winemakers, I mean, I'll drink it all day long.
So if somebody were to, if somebody hasn't had the pleasure of tasting Cuda Ridge wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
You know, so yeah, we do Bordeaux wines, but we like to say that we do Bordeaux-style wines, with style being the key word here. So we try to make wines more of the old world style. So my preference, I mean, I really got a liking for wine going, or different styles of wine, taking classes at the local community college here. They had a really good viticulture enology program there, especially on sensory analysis. And that's really, I got my liking for French wines, just old world style wines in general. So that's what we strive for. So I would say our wines are typically less fruit forward than a lot of the wines, the local wines, or even, you know, California style wines. We try to get more earthiness, minerality, lower alcohol, well balanced wines, so that you can have more than one glass and continue drinking on, or they pair well with food. So.
Well, fantastic. You know, I see that you have, you know, a few articles up on your wall, and I'm going to assume a few medals around the way. And I'm curious what your opinion is on wine critics and scorers. I mean, clearly when you do well, you showcase it. But in general, I mean, what is the role of a wine critic and a scorer play in a winery like yours? Or for you as a wine drinker?
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're critically important. You know, some, I think some have more recognition, or I'm trying to get the right word, more, you know, they're more respected, I guess, than others. But to me, it's not so much any one individual award, because there's always error in the process, no matter if it's one person tasting them or whether it's a competition or whatever. But to me, it's more looking at the accumulation of awards. So, you know, some wineries, you know, if they're consistently getting, you know, 88 to 90, you know, yeah, that wine is going to be good. It's a good, decent wine. If you know, if they're getting in the 90s to, let's say, 94, well, then they're going to be pretty solid, pretty decent wines. If that's consistent over time. Similarly with the wine competitions, right? If people are consistent getting golds and higher, you know, that speaks to me, versus, you know, silvers and one gold here type thing. So to me, it's consistency of the awards from the competitions, which matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So of your wines, assuming they were all consistent and pretty equal, if space aliens were to land on your property right now, knock on the door, and you had to choose one of the wines to welcome them with, which one would it be?
Yeah, that was a hard question, because I'm biased, but I think all of our wines are good, and then of course it varies from year to year. But I mean, in general, I mean, I would say I do Cabernet Franc. That's what we're known for, is our Cabernet Franc. So I like to share that whenever I can. But also, you know, it's a nice wine. It's got good complexity to it. It's got a softness to it. It's not over bold. It's a wine that I think, you know, appeals to a large consumer base. So
it's the wine you gave me when I arrived. So I guess, you know,
are you a space alien?
Perhaps. Now, you mentioned, obviously, you make predominantly red wines. Yeah. You do have Sauvignon Blanc. But as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Red.
Still or sparkling?
Still.
And you also mentioned that you make wines that are a little lower in alcohol, a little less fruit forward, a little more mineral driven, balanced, something to pair with food. Yeah. So how do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you believe in the rules of, white wine and fish, red wine and meat, or when you have a selection of predominantly red wines, you make it work with everything? Right.
So we have, so I guess I can answer that a couple of ways. We pretty much always have wine open at the house. A lot of times we just have wine left over from our tasting room that we have, on the counter for a couple of days. So pretty much almost every meal that we have at the house, we're pairing with wines. But when we're doing more formal pairings, like with restaurant, we do a lot of winemaker dinners or formal wine pairing competitions, that type of stuff. The protein to me takes a back seat. So, there are certain things in the protein, I think, that are important for the wine, like the fattiness, the body and the weight of the protein. However, to me, it's the spices, the sauces, and all the other accompaniments that go with that protein that influences as much as anything else. I guess my aha experience there was we were doing a winemaker dinner at a nice local restaurant here, Uncle Yu's. It's an Asian restaurant, and the owner is a sommelier. And I brought my Cabernet Franc. Well, he had my Cabernet Franc, but I had brought it. It was going to be on the menu. And he goes, Larry, we're going to pair this with a white fish. I go, Nick, you're crazy.
Because you followed the rules.
I was trying to follow the rules. And he goes, no, really. So anyway, we had, he brought it out with it was with a Peking sauce, so kind of a spicy red sauce with a little bit of sweetness to it. And it was just a pairing made in heaven. So when I work with like chefs and stuff, like we have our big wine tasting event come up here in Livermore later this year. It's called Taste Our Terroir. We've actually done quite well at that competition.
More awards on the other side of my wall. I didn't notice those, but now.
Yes. So we work with high-end chefs in coming up with those pairings. And what we always like to do is I always like to have them decompose the dishes. So, when we go to do this, don't bring the full, your full stack of food and your full pairing. Can we decompose that and bring out the components of that and taste each individual component and how that component is doing with the wine that we're thinking of pairing with it. And then let's start putting those pieces together, and then the chef is, the chefs are great at then putting it together to present it nice and everything, but let's get what the core ingredients are, in this pairing with that wine. So that's kind of how I like to approach.
So you adjust the food to fit the wine.
Yes. And back on the protein component of that, last year we did our Taste Our Terroir with LB Steak, which is a high-end steakhouse here locally. And we initially were going to do it with the Wagyu beef, right? How can you go wrong with the Wagyu beef? We ended up scaling that back, and we ended up doing it with the ribeye, which was like half the price of this Wagyu. However, in that case, the ribeye had more fat, so we really wanted to get the Wagyu was like just so lean, so we wanted to get some of the fattiness from the protein. But then at the end of the day, it was the sauces and the spices and stuff that really made the dish.
Absolutely. So you started as a garage east winemaker in your home. You source fruit from different vineyards. How much time do you spend in the vineyard?
A lot. I'm very, very active in the vineyards, and the cliche goes it starts in the vineyards, but I've been doing this now. I've had 17 harvests, 18 harvests, and at the end of the day, it really does. The fruit that comes in is defining the wine that you make right from the beginning. So I have a lot of experience and formal education in viticulture, and part of the reason why we source from Livermore Valley is because that way I can be out in the vineyards a lot more and have those close relationships with the growers or the vineyard managers, and give them input if I don't think the vineyard's being done right or needs leaf pooling or whether, the irrigation strategy is problematic, or I think it's problematic. We pick the harvest dates in all the vineyards. I was talking about the Bordeaux-style earlier. One of the key things for us, and how I think I get the Bordeaux-style, is we tend to pick our grapes earlier than most of the other local wineries. So we will actually project when those grapes are ripe, and then line up the pickers based on the projection.
Are there any sort of signs or predictors that you look for that are going to tell you what a harvest is going to give you, so that you can plan this way in advance, or does it not allow you to plan so early?
Well, I would say yes and no. As a winemaker, I've been sourcing from the same vineyards for years, so I have my history of what varietal gets picked at what time. So we have, when I put my initial plans together, I base it on that. However, Mother Nature always has her way of doing things, so no, things get all mixed up as we get into it. But no, we're picking based on ripeness and where the fruit is to our liking.
So in the time that you've spent here, in the 17 years you've been making wine and being in the vineyard all the time, we know every vintage tells a different story. But my question for you is, in a place like Livermore, with the fruit that you source, do you see more variation year to year, or do you see more, commonality?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So it depends. The first thing I would say is that, things are very consistent in Livermore Valley. So our growing seasons tend to be fairly consistent. Our weather patterns, for the most part, tend to be pretty consistent. And typically, the fruit that comes off the vineyards is phenomenal. And unless we have, I don't know, when was it, 2020, when we had the 115 degree temperatures for a week or two, which I guess we just had here, but that was right during harvest time. That screwed up the fruit, but in general, it's pretty consistent. So, now where I was going, what was the question again?
If you see, do you see more variation from year to year, more consistency? And you're saying consistency. So I'm curious.
Consistency, but I guess what I would add to that is, when my first commercial harvest was in 2007, and back then in 07, 08, 09, the harvest was later, and we were processing fruit up to Thanksgiving. And I remember it was freezing out there. There was ice on the bins, and it was just, and that was a normal thing back then. I think we got spoiled here in the 2010s through 2020. Where everything just started coming in right around Labor Day, and we were pretty much finishing up by end of October, for the most part. Some stuff might trickle in, but now recently, it's kind of been all over the place the last 3 or 4 years, so I think we're having more variations in the temperatures. So we are tending to harvest stuff a little bit earlier, and then it does seem like stuff is trickling in a little bit later as well.
Yeah, an extended picking season, as opposed to extended growing season.
Just to make our life more exciting.
Exactly. So because you spend time in the vineyards and you're sourcing from so many different places, do you feel that you have sort of a relationship with each vineyard? Do you talk to the vines? Do you know each of them kind of individually, and do they communicate to you as much as you communicate to them?
No, I'm not a big communicator with nonverbal objects. But I do, in these vineyards and the bigger blocks, I'm very familiar with most of these vineyard blocks, and we have our favorite rows, that we'll source from. So, we'll go out there, or I'll look at them. I'm tasting them frequently, and deciding whether I want to do those same rows or move to a different section. But as far as talking to them, I would say no.
Although maybe, they know you play favorites, so they don't talk to you.
That's right.
Do you have any sort of good luck rituals that you do at the start of harvest for yourself or for your team? Any sort of traditions that you've established?
I mean, other than just getting the equipment out and cleaning it and make sure it's running. That's a good start, but no, not really. We do have our end of harvest ritual. We go to a local Mexican restaurant and do shots, but no, not before.
Well, I mean, a tradition at the end is equally important to a tradition at the start.
Exactly.
At least one of them, you know you're finished. The other one is sort of the anticipation.
Exactly.
So you came to wine a little bit later in your career. I assume this is, as you said, a hobby gone wild, gone haywire, or maybe it's a second career. When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up, and what did you end up doing before you came to wine?
So growing up, I wanted to be either an architect or an airline pilot.
And what did you become?
Neither of those. Although some days I wish I became an architect. I do like architecture, but no, I went into software engineering. So I was in computer programming and software engineering for 27 years. So we started making wine at the end of my software engineering career as a hobby. Mm-hmm. This is where the hobby gone wild comes in, but in the garage, and then we had moved to Livermore, and in 2007 started the commercial winery in the garage as very small wine production as I was still working in Silicon Valley. And then I got laid off in 2008. And then we decided to ramp up the production. We moved to a new facility, not this one, an intermediary one, and increased our production, opened our tasting room there.
It's almost like you were forced into letting your hobby take over.
We were. Yeah, it's interesting because we may have never done it otherwise, because we were doing the home winemaking, and then we always were going to do it as a hobby, and then a retirement business, I guess is a way to put it. What we did not realize at the time is how much work this business is. So
it's almost better you didn't do it for retirement.
Exactly. So it was a blessing that I got laid off. We got forced into doing it and making that my sole career, and then building upon that. So otherwise we would have never got to where we are today.
And here you are today, making wine and having a tasting room and selling it and doing all the things you have to do in addition to just spending time in the vineyard. And when you're not doing all of that, how do you like to spend your free time? Do you remember what free time is?
No, I forgot what that is. Yeah, so...
if you had free time, how would you like to spend it?
I like music. I like going to concerts. We like good food and friends and family. So I would say those things. The outdoors, camping and snow skiing and that type of stuff, although we seem to be doing less and less of that nowadays, but we still like to get outdoors when we can. So, but I'd say mostly, music, food, and friends.
Do you have a favorite band?
I do.
And who are they?
Neil Young is my favorite artist of all time, yes.
Nice. And if you could, share a bottle of wine with Neil Young, which one would you pick?
That's a good question. He would want this bolder one, Petit Verdot. I think I would do Petit Verdot with Neil Young. Petit Verdot is our, it's my go-to wine when we're smoking cigars with my buddies out in the backyard.
So we'll just add Neil Young.
Yes, and then Neil may be smoking cigars or other things, but I think that would be a good pairing.
So, if you're planning a romantic evening for you and your wife, what kind of wines get open then? Now I'm really curious, because we got the cigar wine, but what sets a romantic tone on the table with wine? What makes your wife happy, I should say?
Right. Yeah, usually we will, we do have a sizable wine cabinet, so we have quite a few wines in there from Napa, Bordeaux, and Burgundy that are, 10, 15-year-old wines, and we kind of use those for those special occasions, either just us going out to dinner, or if we have wine-loving friends over that enjoy and appreciate wine, we'll crack them open. But I would say typically we would open a cab, probably a Napa cab, a 10, 15-year-old Napa cab, or a Bordeaux, 10, 15-year-old Bordeaux, I would say.
And set the mood.
Yes, exactly.
So you had an illustrious career prior to this.
Yes, very illustrious.
Well, working in the tech sector, and now you're working in wine. And of course, no one had ever told you, as you had said, how much work having a winery is. But I'm curious. Is there something someone did tell you along the way, a piece of advice that someone gave you, a parent, a mentor, a teacher, somewhere that did stick with you, as opposed to the person who never warned you about getting into wine?
Yeah, so I guess my story on that one is, I would say it's David Everett, who is an instructor at the Las Positas Community College, which I referred to earlier. And before we had started the winery, I was probably doing home winemaking at the time. I was taking a lot of classes at the community college, mostly in viticulture and in wine sensory analysis. And in the wine sensory analysis class, he started the class by doing a blind tasting. And there was a couple people in the class who were very vocal and thought they were wine experts. And
there's always one or two.
Oh yes, and they let everyone know it, and etc. So then we go to taste these wines, and they were sherries, and there were sherries from all over the world. So we taste these wines, and then David asked, well, which one do you like the best? Well, this guy stands up and, it's this one here. This one is the best one out of all of these lineup, hands down. So David goes, okay, very interesting. And so then asks other people, everyone gets their input. So then he unveils these wines. Well, that wine was a Sutter Home White Zinfandel at about $6 a bottle.
Not really a sherry style wine.
Exactly. And and then he had some of those that were wines from Juarez, Spain, and some real true sherries, which a lot of people don't have experience with and such. And so what I learned on that experience was, number one, keep your mouth shut. So, be objective and not subjective. So when you're describing wines, talk about more what you get in those wines, not what your feelings are about those wines. If pressed against the wall, you can do that, but be aware that it may not be what you think it is.
Yeah. So, wine is pretty deceiving that way.
Correct.
It's probably one of the few industries that can keep you humble.
Yes, exactly. Once you think you got it figured out, you're back to square one.
Well, so when you look back at your career, your entire career, yes, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's the winery, starting the winery, and I would say it has to do with just kind of what we have built a place for people to come and enjoy wine and socialize and meet people. And to us, looking back on this, I never dreamed that that's what would be created. It was more of, we want to make good wine, the best wine we can possibly make. How do we build this business? Blah, blah, blah. But never thought about it from the perspective of, this is really an experience and a place that people come to enjoy and meet people and enjoy wine and food. And we've met some of our best friends in the world through the winery. So
that's wonderful.
It's been, yeah.
It's not just an achievement, but it's something it affects your whole lifestyle. So
correct.
I think that's,
and it will be with us, forever. So
yeah.
Yep.
Well, now I'm going to have you fill in a question. Finish the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Oh, how about a car without wheels? I'll stick with the car theme.
Beautifully done. I love the full circle thing.
There you go.
Perfect.
But I guess the reason I say that, but for us, wine is an integral part would meals.
Absolutely.
So, it feels like something is missing if we don't have wine with our meals. So that's why I would say that.
Well, so now I have a question, and maybe you answered it already, but maybe there's another name that'll come to mind. We're sitting at a table. You're pouring a little wine in my glass.
A little
Cabernet Franc. A little in your glass. There's another glass and another empty seat next to you. And I'm curious, who from any walk of life, living or deceased, do you wish that you could sit next to and share a bottle of your wine that you made?
Yeah, I don't have any person individually, I would say. I guess I would say a renowned kind of wine critic. So, we've tasted wine with a lot of sommeliers and, and people educated in the wine business, but not really I guess I would say a real world-class wine critic, and you could name your favorites. But really we'd like to just sit down with them, and because of the, I'd like to get their real input, constructive input on the wines and how they think they would compare to some of the finest wines that they've tasted, because they've tasted a lot more fine wines than I have. I've had some good ones, but not like these. So anyway, what differentiates, this style of wine from, Romanée Conté or from Petrus or from Haut-Brieuc or whatever. So what is the what is the differentiating factor?
You want some critical feedback.
Yes.
Not a philosophical talk, but critical feedback.
Yes. So.
And Neil Young will be at the other table, other seat.
That'd be a different discussion. Yes. I don't know that we'd be talking about the finer points of wine.
So. You're talking about some of the wines you collect, and I know the wines that you make and that you drink. And if you had to select three wines, any three wines, to take to a deserted island, what are the three wines you would pick?
Oh, three wines? Usually people ask what's the one wine.
See, I'm more generous.
You are. Well, Cabernet Franc would be one.
Like yours, or would it be from a particular producer or a particular region?
I have to pick one of those? You
thought I was being nice with three, but...
But I would say probably a Franc blend from Pomerol or Saint-Emilion, I guess.
Okay.
That's what I would say there. That would be one. Number two, I would get a Marsanne from Burgundy. I don't drink a lot of white, but if you're on a deserted island, you're going to want some variation, and it can be very warm and hot, and there might be days for some white wine.
Yeah, so. You gotta mix it up a little bit. Okay, so you've got
a third would have to be Cab. We drink Cab all the time. We feel life would be empty without a Cabernet Sauvignon.
So we have a Bordeaux Cab Franc, we have a Burgundy Merceau Chardonnay, and then the Cabernet Sauvignon is...
oh my goodness, from where? Bordeaux. Yeah, it would be Bordeaux, yeah. Yeah, Napa, I love Napa cabs. I have a lot of them, but, a lot of them to me tend to be overly bold and overly tannic for my liking. So I tend to like the softer style cabs, and then I don't like extremely fruit-forward style wine. So I think my safest bet would be a Bordeaux cab.
I love it. Well, now we have 4 of your wines sitting here, and you've talked a little bit about the Cabernet Franc, and you mentioned the Petit Verdot as wines you would give it out to people that would come here, or Neil Young, or the aliens, or myself. But I'm curious now if you can sort of pair these wines with music. We're going to kind of end on this lovely note of wine soundtrack. I know you don't sing to your vines, but let's see if wine conjures up an emotion the way the wine does. If music conjures up an emotion the way wine does. So let's start with your Cabernet Franc that I've been sipping on.
Okay, that would be, so that's kind of, soft, elegant, relaxing, just kind of sets the mood. That would be Neil Young, Harvest.
Okay. Your Petit Verdot.
Yes, so that, I'm going to go Neil Young with that one too. I'll change it up on the next one. But on the Petit Verdot, it would be Neil Young, Like a Hurricane.
Okay, so you could do the same artist, but different songs.
Okay, so Like a Hurricane, because it's a rockin', loud, jamming song, which Petit Verdot is kind of bold and in your face. But then it's about the song is about a love story and loving this girl is wild like a hurricane, but there's true love. So that would be my Petit Verdot.
Okay. And what about Cabernet Sauvignon?
Can I do Caménère instead?
Maybe, but
Cabernet Sauvignon. That would be putting me on the spot here on this one. So we do different styles of cab. This one is more of our fruit forward kind of style cab. So I would go with maybe Tom Petty with how about Breakdown?
Okay. Okay. Look at you. See, we got the rock thing. I'm going to throw you another, left field one. Because you only make one white wine, but we should do white wine. What about your Sauvignon Blanc?
Yeah, the Sauvignon Blanc is, our Sauvignon Blanc is done in stainless steel. It's very aromatic nose, a lot of aromatic flavors, very citrusy, kind of that style of Sauvignon Blanc. So maybe Jimmy Buffett, maybe like a Jimmy Buffett song, because it reminds me of the beach and being outdoors and that kind of lifestyle.
I love it. Okay, I'll throw you a softball for the last one. See, you're doing really well in this, and I like your rock theme. I would normally stop at 3 wines, but you're on a roll here, so let's do your Caménère.
Okay, that would be Steppenwolf, Born to be Wild.
You were just waiting to give that to me.
I was. So that is, out of all of our wines, the Caménère is the most different out of all of them. I tell people it's the most really Bordeaux-style wine we make. It's very herbaceous. It's got that green pepper, that herbaceousness to it. The fruit is hard to find. I mean, it's really layered underneath the wine. So it's kind of the wild wine out of the bunch.
Well, fantastic. See, Larry, you survived. You did it. You got your music. I'm ready to rock out with some of your wines. But I have one more question to end it. The first part of it is, you've traveled around, you said. You've collected wines from different places. But what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to explore?
Yeah. I think right now my wife and I have been talking about South America, so Chile and Argentina. So we've done a lot of the wine regions in Europe, and we'd like to try there. I think I'm thinking Chile wines might
because of Caménère.
Well, that too, but the Chile wines might be somewhat similar to California as far as climate and stuff goes. But then, you got the Caménère and Malbec. We're very well known for our Malbec, so. So I think Chile and Argentina would be a fun place to go to, but a fun place to go to for wine as well.
Absolutely. And let's just finish up, and you tell me if people want to come visit here and they want to taste Cuda Ridge wines, how can they find you, where can they find you, and what can they experience when they come here? Yeah,
so we're pretty easy to find. So you can go to our website, so www.CudaRidgeWines.com, all one word. You can find information about our wines there, purchase wines there. We do ship to most states. You can make reservations for the winery. We also take walk-ins. And then, as far as our experience, I'm very family oriented. We're very low key here. Our staff is low key. Our family is typically here, and if not, our staff is like family. So you'll feel that way. We have a beautiful outdoor patio area, so during the nice days here, sitting out in the vineyards, having wine, is a very enjoyable experience.
So just come and relax. Maybe you'll get Larry to put on some rock and roll in the background, and you can sip along with the Petit Verdot or Cab Franc or any of the Bordeaux grapes with a little rock music, of course.
And on a very rare day, I may even bring the Cuda.
There you go. You still have it.
We still have it, yes. There's pictures of it around here somewhere.
Wow. And it's what year?
It's 1970.
Wow.
So we still have it, and I don't drive it a lot. Everyone that comes here asks, where's the car? It's at home.
I'm just surprised that none of your wines conjured up the song Barracuda.
I know.
Well, on that note, let's go find one. No, but Larry, thank you for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack. It's been a joy talking with you. Really fun, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.